You know, it is always humbling to speak before the NAACP because it's a powerful reminder of the debt that we all owe to those who marched for us and fought for us and stood up on our behalf, of the sacrifices that were made for us by those we never knew, and of the giants whose shoulders I stand on here today. They're the men and women we read about in history books and hear about in church, whose lives we honor with schools and boulevards and federal holidays that bear their names. But what I want to remind you tonight, because it is Youth Night, what I want to remind you all of tonight is that these giants, these icons of America's past, were not much older than many of you when they took up freedom's cause and made their mark on history. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was but 26 years old when he led a bus boycott in Montgomery that mobilized a movement. John Lewis was only 25 years old, an activist, when he faced down billy clubs on the bridge in Selma and helped arouse the conscience of our nation. Diane Nash was even younger when she helped found SNCC and led the freedom rides down south. Your chairman, Julian Bond, was a mere 25-year-old state legislator when he put his own shoulder to the wheel of history. It's because of them and all those whose names never made it into the history books, those men and women, young and old, black, brown, white, clear-eyed, straight-back, who refused to settle for the world as it is, who had the courage to remake the world as it should be. It's because of them that I stand before you tonight as the Democratic nominee for President of the United States of America. Because of them. Because of you. And if I have the privilege of serving as your next president, 100 years after the founding of the NAACP, I will stand up for you the same way that earlier generations of Americans stood up for me, by fighting to ensure that every single one of us has the chance to make it if we try. That's what the American dream is all about. What does that mean? What does the American dream mean? It means removing the barriers of prejudice and misunderstanding that still exist in America. It means fighting to eliminate discrimination from every corner of our country. It means changing hearts and changing minds and making sure that every American is treated equally under the law. That's a definition of social justice, but from the start, the NAACP understood that social justice alone is not enough. As Dr. King once said, the inseparable twin of racial justice is economic justice. And that's why Dr. King went to Memphis in his final days to stand with striking sanitation workers. That's why the march that Roy Wilkins helped to lead 45 years ago this summer wasn't just named the March on Washington. It wasn't just named the March on Washington for Freedom. It was named the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, for jobs and justice. What Dr. King and Roy Wilkins understood is that it matters little if you have the right to sit at the front of the bus if you can't afford the bus fare. It doesn't matter if you have the right to sit at the lunch counter if you can't afford the lunch. What they understood is that so long as Americans are denied the decent wages and good benefits and fair treatment and opportunity that they deserve, then the dream for which so many gave so much will remain out of reach. And that to live up to our founding promise of equality for all, we have to make sure that opportunity is open to all. That's what I've been fighting to do throughout my over 20 years in public service. That's why I fought in the Senate to end tax breaks for companies that ship jobs overseas and give those tax breaks to companies that create good jobs right here in the United States of America, right here in Cincinnati, right here in Ohio. That's why I brought Democrats and Republicans together in Illinois to put $100 million in tax cuts, not into the pockets of the wealthy who didn't need them and weren't even asking for them, but into the pockets of hard-working families. And why I fought to expand health care to 150,000 children and parents, and to end the outrage of black women making just 62 cents for every dollar that many of their male co-workers make. That is not just, that is not right. And that's why we changed it in Illinois, and that's why we have to change it all across the nation. And that's why I moved to Chicago after college. As some of you know, I turned down more lucrative jobs because I was inspired by that civil rights movement. I was inspired by Julian Bond, and John Lewis, and Dr. King, and Diane Nash. And I wanted to do my part in the ongoing battle for opportunity in this country. So I went to work for a group of churches to help turn around neighborhoods that were devastated when the local steel plants closed. And I reached out to community leaders, black, brown, and white. And together we gave job training to the jobless and set up after-school programs to keep our young people off the streets. And block by block, we helped turn those neighborhoods around. So I've been working my entire adult life to help build an America where social justice is being served and economic justice is being served. An America where we all have an equal chance to make it if we try. That's the America I believe in, and that's the America that you believe in. That's the America that the NAACP has been fighting for over these past 99 years. And that's the America we have to keep marching towards today, because our work is not over. Just electing me president doesn't mean our work is over. We've got more work to do. When so many of our nation's schools are failing, especially those in our poorest rural and urban communities, denying millions of young Americans the chance to fulfill their potential and live out their dreams, then we have more work to do. When CEOs are making more in 10 minutes than the average workers earn in a year, and millions of families are losing their homes due to predatory, unscrupulous lending, and checked neither by the sense of corporate ethics or a vigilant government, when the dream of entering the middle class and staying there is fading for young people in our community, then we have more work to do. When any human being is denied a life of dignity and respect, no matter whether they live in Anacostia or Appalachia or in a village in Africa, when people are trapped in extreme poverty we know how to curb, or are suffering from diseases that we know how to prevent, when they're going without the medicines that they so desperately need, then we have more work to do. That's what this election's about. It's about the responsibilities we all share for the future we hold in common. It's about each and every one of us doing our part to build that more perfect union. It's about the responsibilities that corporate America has. Responsibilities that start with ending a culture on Wall Street that says what's good for me is good enough, that puts their bottom line ahead of what's right for America. Because what we've learned in such a dramatic way in recent months is that the pain in our economy trickles up. Wall Street can't thrive so long as Main Street is struggling. And America is better off when the well-being of American business and the American people are aligned. Our CEOs have to recognize they have a responsibility not just to grow their profit margins, but to be fair to their workers and honest to their shareholders, and to help strengthen our economy as a whole. That's how we'll ensure that economic justice is being served, and that's what this election is all about. It's about the responsibilities that Washington has. Responsibilities that start with restoring fairness to our economy by making sure that the playing field isn't tilted to benefit the special interests at the expense of ordinary Americans, and that we're rewarding not just wealth, but the work and workers who created it. That's why I'll offer a middle-class tax cut so we can lift up hardworking families and give relief to struggling homeowners so we can end our housing crisis and keep people in their homes and provide training to young people to work in the jobs of the future and invest in our infrastructure so we can create millions of new jobs. If we can spend $10 billion in Iraq every single month, we can spend some of that money right here rebuilding the United States of America. And that's why I'll end the outrage of 1 in 5 African Americans going without the health care they deserve. We are going to guarantee health care for anyone who needs it, make it affordable for anyone who wants it, ensure that the quality of your health care does not depend on the color of your skin or where you live. And we are not going to wait 20 years from now to do it or 10 years from now to do it. We're going to do it by the end of my first term as President of the United States of America. Here's what else we're going to do. We'll make sure every child in this country gets a world-class education from the day they're born till the day they graduate from college. Now, I understand that Senator McCain is going to be coming here in a couple of days and is going to talk about education. I'm glad he's going to, because this has to be a bipartisan effort. Not just Democrats, but Republicans need to recognize that too many of our young people are falling behind. Now, the fact is, though, what Senator McCain's offering amounts to too much of the same old tired rhetoric about vouchers. And well, I believe we need to move beyond the same debate we've been having for the past 30 years when we haven't got anything done. We need to fix and improve our public schools, not throw our hands up and walk away from them. We need to uphold the ideal of public education, but we also need to reform it. We also need to reform it. We've got to reform No Child Left Behind, which left the money behind, but we also have to introduce a comprehensive strategy to recruit an army of new quality teachers to our communities and to pay them more money and to give them more support and expect more from our schools. We'll invest in early childhood education programs so that our children don't begin the race of life behind the starting line. And we'll offer $4,000 tuition credits to make college affordable for any young person who wants to go and is willing to put some time in on community service or national service, joining the Peace Corps, teaching in an underserved school, working in an underserved hospital. We'll invest in you. You'll invest in America. Together, we're going to march this country forward. That's what we have in store. That's what this election's all about. Because, as the NAACP knows better than anybody, the fight for social justice and economic justice begins in the classroom. It doesn't end there, though. We have to fight for all those young men and young women standing on street corners with little hope for the future beside ending up in jail or in the funeral home. We have to break the cycle of poverty and violence that's gripping too many neighborhoods in this country. That's why I'll expand the earned income tax credit so that if you work, you should not be poor. That's why I'll end the Bush policy of taking cops off the street at the moment they're needed most, because we need to give local law enforcement the support they need. That's why we'll provide job training for ex-offenders, because we need to make sure that they don't return to a life of crime and get wise and smart when dealing with crime. That's why I'll build on the success of the Harlem Children's Zone in New York and launch an all-hands-on-deck effort to end poverty in this country, because that's how we'll put that dream that Dr. King and Roy Wilkins fought for within the reach of the next generation of children. And if people tell you we can't afford to invest in education or health care or fighting poverty, you just remind them of all the money we've been spending on tax cuts for folks who didn't need them, on that war in Iraq. If we can spend as much money as we've spent in Iraq, it will be over $1 trillion. Imagine what we could have done with $1 trillion. If we can spend that money there, we can spend some of that money right here and in big cities and small towns in every corner of this country, rebuilding our infrastructure, putting people back to work, keeping people in their homes, giving them health care, sending young people to school. So we've got to demand more responsibility from Washington. We've got to push aside those special interests and let the voices of the American people ring out. We got to demand more responsibility from Wall Street. But you know what? We also have to demand more from ourselves. Now, I know there's some who've been saying I've been too tough talking about responsibility. NAACP, I'm here to report I'm not going to stop talking about it. Because as much as I'm out there fighting to make sure government's doing its job and the marketplace is doing its job, and we're passing laws to bring more investment and more education and more infrastructure into our communities and putting our young people back to work, no matter how much money we invest in our communities, how many 10-point plans we propose, how many government programs we launch, none of it will make a difference, at least not enough of a difference, if we also at the same time don't seize more responsibility in our own lives. Dr. King understood this. Dr. King talked about it's not an either-or proposition. It's a both-and proposition. We need societal responsibility and we need individual responsibility. We need politicians doing what they're supposed to do and CEOs doing what they're supposed to do, and we need parents doing what they're supposed to do. That's how we'll truly honor those who came before us. I know that Thurgood Marshall did not argue Brown versus Board of Education so that some of us could just stop doing our jobs as parents. That wasn't the deal. I know that 9 little children didn't walk through a schoolhouse door in Little Rock so we could stand by and let our children drop out of school and turn to gangs for the support they're not getting elsewhere in the community. That's not the freedom that we fought to achieve. That's not the America that our leadership sought to build. That's not the dream they had for our children. So if we're serious about reclaiming that dream, we have to do more in our own lives. There's nothing wrong with saying that. Because that and by the way, when we are taking care of our own stuff, then a lot of other folks are going to be interested in joining up and working with us to take care of America's stuff. We can lead by example as we did during the Civil Rights Movement. Because the problems that plague our communities, they're not unique to us. We just have it a little worse. But they're not unique to us. They're providing guidance for our children, turning off the TV set, putting away the video games, attending those parent-teacher conferences, helping our children with their homework, setting a good example. That's what everybody's got to do if we're going to be moving this country forward. Teaching our daughters to never allow images on television to tell them what they're worth. Teaching our sons to treat women with respect and to realize responsibility does not end at conception. That what makes them a man is not the ability to have a child, but to raise one. That's a message we need to send. Being good neighbors and good citizens who are willing to volunteer in our communities to help our synagogues and our churches, our mosques, our community centers, feed the hungry and care for the elderly. We have to do our part to lift up this country. That's where change begins. And after all, that's the true genius of America. Not that America is perfect, but that America will be perfect. Not that we are perfect, that we can make ourselves more perfect, that brick by brick, callous hand by callous hand, people who love this country can change it. That's our most enduring responsibility, the responsibility to future generations. We have to change this country for them. On Youth Night, let's remind ourselves of our intergenerational responsibilities. Our young people, they're waiting. They're looking for leadership. They're looking for guidance. We have to teach them. We have to teach them right from wrong. We have to leave them a planet that's cleaner, a nation that's safer, a world that's more equal and more just. I'm grateful to all of you for all that you've done. I'm grateful for many of you in your own capacity and not as NAACP, everything you've done for my campaign. Just helping you out there, Jim. But I want to remind you, we've got more work to do. We cannot rest. We cannot rest. And I know that if you put your shoulder to the wheel of history and take up the cause of perfecting our union just as earlier generations of Americans did before you, if you take up the fight for opportunity and equality and prosperity for all, if you march with me and fight with me and get your friends registered to vote, if you stand with me this fall, if you do not decide to sit it out, but you decide that this is our moment, this is our time, 100 years after the NAACP is founded, that we are going to lead this nation into a more unified, more prosperous future, then not only will we help close the responsibility deficit in this country, not only will we help achieve social justice and economic justice for all, but I'll come back to you next year on that anniversary, and I will stand before you as President of the United States of America, and at that moment, you and I will truly know that a new day has come in this country we love. Thank you, NAACP. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.